Thank you so much, musicians. Would you please take your Bibles with me and turn in them to Leviticus 26? And if you would, please stand as you turn. I'm going to shorten the scripture reading just a touch. We're going to end in verse 13 of chapter 26. So Leviticus 26, verses 1 to 13. Please follow along as I read. You shall not make idols for yourselves, or erect an image or pillar, and you shall not set up a figured stone in your land, to bow down to it, for I am the Lord your God. You shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord. If you walk in my statutes and observe my commandments and do them, then I will give you your rains in their seasons, and the land shall yield its increase, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. Your threshing shall last to the time of the grape harvest, and the grape harvest shall last to the time for sowing. And you shall eat your bread to the full, and dwell in your land securely. I will give peace in the land, and you shall lie down, and none shall make you afraid. And I will remove harmful beasts from the land, and the sword shall not go through your land. You shall chase your enemies, and they shall fall before you by the sword. 5 of you shall chase 100, and 100 of you shall chase 10,000. And your enemies shall fall before you by the sword. I will turn to you and make you fruitful and multiply you, and will confirm my covenant with you. You shall eat old store long kept, and you shall clear out the old to make way for the new. I will make my dwelling among you, and my soul shall not abhor you. And I will walk among you, and will be your God, and you shall be my people. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, that you should not be their slaves. And I have broken the bars of your yoke, and made you walk erect. May the Lord add his blessing this morning to the reading of his word. You can be seated. So we are nearing the end of the book of Leviticus, the last 2 chapters of the book, which for all we know could take up to 2 years. We don't know exactly how long these last 2 chapters will take, but I believe they'll go rather quickly, personally. But it's interesting that as God gets into the blessings and the curses that he's parading before the people, he gives essentially like a banner, a heading above the blessings and the curses. The blessings and the discipline of the Lord might be better than curses. It's a banner above those. And in that banner, in that header, he puts 3 things. And you get the idea that these 3 things indicate the future for good or for ill. If these 3 things are handled properly, you can expect good fortune. If they're not handled properly, you can expect ill fortune. That's the idea. You see this in verses 1 and 2. What are those 3 things? I want to put them on the screen for you here, just so you can kind of absorb them. They're going to be our major 3 points throughout the sermon this morning. You see, the first thing that he talks about is that you're not to make a false image, an image of another god, whether of stone, carved, what's the other word he uses? Figured stone. Like, no false images, okay? And then the second one has to do with rest, that you're to honor his Sabbaths, his days and years of rest that he provides his people. Like, that should be easy, right? Harder than you think, actually, to take a break. But, so image, rest, and then to honor or be reverently handle his sanctuary, which is just another word for his house, where he dwells. And so these are kind of the cream that rises up to the very tip top. If you're to take all God's laws and boil them down, this is what's left. It has to do somehow, some way with his image, rest, and his sanctuary. And so the way I'm going to talk through these is I'm going to talk first about sanctuary, then I'm going to go to image, and then I'm going to end with the middle one, rest, and then we'll talk a bit about Christ at the end. But I want to start with sanctuary. Why do I start with sanctuary? Because sanctuary essentially helps us understand the other two, okay? So I'm gonna start there. What's the big deal about God's house? You really get to see this in the book of Deuteronomy. In the book of Deuteronomy, God has a consistent phrase he says as Israel's about to go into the promised land and they're about to set up shop in Canaan. He says, I'm going to direct you to the place where I will put my name. That's what he says. So I'm going to direct you to a place where you should put my name, where my name will dwell. Okay? So in our houses, a lot of times we have a number on our house. But when you go up to the UP or go through Wisconsin, you're driving through like wooded areas, a lot of times you'll see there might be a number there, but it also say like the Ludlows, They'll have a name on there at their cabin or the retreat. They might name their cabin. Well, God's house is called by his name. So it's not a number. I mean, if it were a number, what number would it be? 7, good. Okay, it's totally typified by rest. But it's called by his name. It's his name. So God's name is totally and constantly associated with his house. Okay? And this helps us understand image a little bit better as we'll talk. But just look at an example of this. Deuteronomy 12:10. When you go over the Jordan and live in the land that the Lord your God is giving you to inherit, and when he gives you rest from all your enemies around, that's the rest of his house, so that you live in safety, then to the place that the Lord your God will choose to make his name dwell there, there you shall bring all that I command you. And so it's this place that's called by his name. But something really significant happens at that place. Because when you gather at the place where his name is, guess what happens to you? You get a blessing pronounced on you, okay? And this blessing is very unique. Look at how it's given in number 6. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron, that's the priest, that's the one who symbolically lives at God's house, and his sons, saying, thus you shall bless the people of Israel, and you shall say to them, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So shall they put my name upon the people of Israel, and I will bless them. Okay? So you go to God's house, and that's where his name dwells. But as you're at God's house, his name effectively comes out of the house and rests on you via blessing. The priest blesses you, and now you carry the name of God, which now starts making sense of this concept of image. Because in the ancient places, they would have the house of their God, and guess what would be inside of that house? An image, an idol, a carved stone, like it would be their Buddha or whatever their God was, would be in this house of worship, okay? And God constantly says, man, you make all these false images, and as you look at them, what are they? They're carved stone. They have eyes, but they can't see. They have ears, but they can't hear. They've got mouths, but they can't speak. They've got hands, but they can't use them. It's like he's saying, look at the vast difference between false God's images and the true God's images. They've got ears and they can hear. We got eyes and we can see. We got mouths, we can talk, speak. We got hands, we can write poetry. We can build things. Isn't God's images, aren't they way better than your false God images? Yours are laughable compared to these. You know, I remember reading an author talk about visiting a robotic convention where there's like these tables where the new robotic movements are coming out. And he said, I saw a hand, robotic hand, for people that lost their hand, you know? And everyone's like Googling, is that the word? Google? Huh? Oogle, thank you. Yeah. Oogling over these robotic hands. And he's like, but I'm watching everybody losing their minds over how amazing these robotic hands are. And I'm like, this is unbelievable compared to that, you know? And I was telling something like that to Milt one time, and Milt's like, yeah, he's like, you know, you see these planes fly by, and they make all this noise, you know, and we're blown away at these planes. He's like, but then you watch a bird, and a bird, like, just, like, goes any which way it wants to go, and it doesn't even have an engine, you know? Doesn't make any noise. Like, so we're just like, God is unbelievable, and his images are unbelievable. And so God has a place where his name is to be honored, his name is to be reverenced, and this is to be kept sacred. It was part of Adam's 2 commands when God put Adam in the place where he first called his name, which was Eden. And Adam lives in that place, and he had 2 commands. The one command was to spread this place out. In other words, invite everybody to this party. Make Eden larger and larger and larger until the earth is one giant Eden, one giant temple, where everybody is part of the Trinitarian fellowship of this place. That was the first command. And then the second command is that as it spreads out, guard it. Keep watch over it. Don't let anything impure come into it. Because if the glory here is going to spread across the earth, it has to be kept the glory. It can't be diluted. It can't be infiltrated by false thinking and false ways of viewing things. It's got to be kept sacred and right. You know, it's like if someone opens a restaurant and it's successful, and then they want to do another restaurant. Well, they want the DNA of that restaurant to look a lot like the DNA of this new start, and so they spend a lot of time getting it right. Well, Eden's no different. God wanted it to spread out, but he wanted it to spread out in a guarded sort of way. And so he says, if you're going to live long in this land that I'm taking you into, you need to reverence my house. You need to keep it sacred. Because if you botch this, if you botch knowledge of me, all hell breaks loose. You can't have anything different. If you botch knowledge of me, it all goes to pot. That's the way it goes. You know, for those of you who are familiar with It's a Wonderful Life, you know, it moves from Bedford Falls to Pottersville, where you walk and you can't even recognize the place anymore. And that's what it's like when you depart from the knowledge of God. In Hosea, God will talk to Hosea and he says, look, this people, they don't know me. They have no relationship with me. And after he says that to Hosea, he's like, look at them. And Hosea looks at them, and what does he see? He sees swearing, adultery, murder, bloodshed follows bloodshed. Even the environment and the creation is mistreated. It's just total chaos. So the further someone moves away from reverencing God's name at his place, all hell breaks loose. It all goes bad. And this is why I say over and over and over again, if you're disgusted by the state of our nation, look in the mirror. Because we're the ones that are in charge of our nation. You might think it's the politicians. No, when God comes to judge a nation, he starts with the pastors. Then he starts with the people in the church. Because we are to be the keepers of our place. So if our nation's going to pot, it's not our political leaders' fault. It's our fault. And we have to feel that. I have to feel that. This is the way God thinks. And so we got to think the way he thinks. So sanctuary is the first thing he starts with, or one of the 3 things he starts with. It's the first thing I start with. But in order to talk about sanctuary, the way that you know if the sanctuary is right, or one of the ways you can tell, is by looking at the images, which is us. And so let's talk for a second about images. This is one of mine and Pastor Alex's all-time favorite memes. It's such a good meme. It can be used for so many things. And don't think I'm getting political here. I think it was President Trump, just in the State of the Union, thought he'd like to give himself the Medal of Honor. I think this is kind of a notorious guy problem, I think is what it really, really is. Listen to some of the memes that have been attached, the statements that have been attached to the meme. I saw one that says, when Netflix puts its own movies in the most popular section. You guys are a little slow this morning. Another person put to this meme, me when writing my progress report at school. I'll botch this, but mine and Alex's favorite one is me on Father's Day when I get like mediocre congratulations from my wife. Or excuse me, on Mother's Day, when I do like decently well on Mother's Day for Becky, this is how I feel, like, well done, Ben. Well done, Ben. And so I love this meme. It's absolutely hilarious. It can be used for so many things. It also communicates a devilish way inside of us, which is, in whose image are we being cast? Are we casting ourselves in our own image, or are we being cast in God's image? One of the scariest passages in all the Bible, from my vantage point, is Psalm 50:21. Listen to how the psalmist writes this. This is God speaking, and he says this, these things you have done. Imagine God saying this to you, to me. Ben, these things you have done, and I have been silent. You thought I was one like yourself, but now I rebuke you and lay the charge before you. I mean, do you see how this verse fits very well with Jesus saying when people come and say, Lord, Lord, didn't we do this and didn't we do that? He says, I never knew you. You thought that I was just like you. That's the way you lived your life. And you congratulated you because you thought I was like you. In other words, you interpreted yourself through your lens, Ben, not mine. And you gave yourself the Medal of Honor. You thought you were doing shipshape. But I'm not like you. And so this is the big question, is how do we evaluate our image? Are we casting ourselves in our own image or in our society's image or even in our church's image? I mean, you get to the book of Revelation and he evaluates 7 churches and they all have something wrong with them. So certainly our church has something wrong with it. But are we evaluating ourselves by our church, by the people sitting next to us, or are we evaluating ourselves by this? This is the big question. We need to think very carefully about how we consider our own image and whose image it's being crafted in. I want to give us some evaluative questions that you can think about and say, okay, in whose image am I being cast, or am I casting myself in a certain way? Let's take a look at them. Let me ask you this. Whose glory is at the center of your stories? Just let that sink in for a moment. This is a helpful way to discern whose image am I portraying out to the world and to the people around me. Whose glory is at the center of your stories? Paul will say in Romans that he'll speak of nothing except what Christ has accomplished through him. So, are we going through our daily life constantly thinking, God, what are you going to accomplish through me? What are the good works that you're putting before me that I am to walk into? Even the ones that intimidate me, and I'm very scared to walk into this good work that you've prepared for me, but I trust that you'll give me the strength and the provision to get through it. Like, whose glory is at the center of your story? Jesus will say about the Pharisees that they couldn't believe in him because they didn't care about the glory that comes from the only God. They actually cared about the glory that comes from other people. So if you care more about the glory that comes from other people, you will never be able to believe in Jesus. Because the glory you're really after is what Tom and Doug and anyone else thinks of me in this room. Paul will say, I don't care what any of you think of me. I don't even care what I think about myself. What I really care is about what God thinks of me. So when you tell a story, when you tell a success story, whose glory is at the center? Does your story regularly end in, and then God did this? I screwed up here, here, and here, but then God did this. That is boasting in the Lord, and that's what you were made for. You were to be a place where people could come and hear stories about God and what He's doing in and through your life and the people around you. Okay? So, whose glory is at the center of your stories? Are you the hero, or is God the hero at the center of your regular stories? That's a helpful question. Second, how defensive are you when criticized, disagreed with, dismissed, or misunderstood? How defensive are you? See, because if we are a people that defend our honor to the death, whose honor are we seeking for the world to honor? Ours. So if we're very defensive when all of these things happen, what that can tell you is that you are defending your image, not God's. Okay? And your ego is going to be exceptionally fragile because people can tend to praise you one day and condemn you the next, right? And so if it all revolves around your ego and what people think about it, you're going to be up and down in every way, which way around. I shared with the new members class downstairs, I was like, in Luke 7, there's a fascinating account that happens with a prostitute coming to wipe Jesus' feet with her tears and her hair. But it happens in Simon the Pharisee's house, who's a very religious guy. And so as she's doing this, Simon's judging her. Jesus calls out Simon, and then Jesus turns to the woman and he says, you are forgiven. Go in peace. And I asked the people in the class, I said, okay, when she stands up and she starts walking out of the room, she's probably going to walk by Simon, who's standing in the room there with her. And will Simon have agreed with Jesus at this point, or will Simon still be thinking she's a dirty prostitute? Right? Well, if Simon's anything like us, I tend to change pretty slowly. I hate to say. So it's very possible that this woman walking out is going to walk past Simon, who's thinking, judging her, right? And the question is will she see herself through the lens of Jesus or through Simon the Pharisee's lenses? Which one will she view herself as, right? Because if she views herself through Jesus, she doesn't have to be defensive. She can just be confident because she views herself in and through Jesus Christ. That's the idea. So how do you handle being criticized, disagreed with, dismissed, misunderstood? It's okay to be hurt by that, but are you hurt in proportion to the crime? Third, when you think about others, are you thinking about them and their personal welfare, especially their heart relationship to God? Or are you thinking of these people in their relationship to you and how they can advantage you and incentivize you? Do you see the difference? That in one way, you're seeing a person for themselves, for who they are, and what is their relationship with the Lord, and how can I assist them? How can I build them up in the Lord? How can I help the maturation process in the Lord? Or do you view these people as a tool and what they can do for you or serve you or benefit you? Because if that's the case, you're the false image that's being erected in God's house. But if you're looking to build others up in the image and glory of God, then that's a totally different way of relating with people. You're there to serve them in that, not to have them serve you. Okay? Some more. From whom are you seeking approval? Just think about this for a second. Those of you who struggle with people pleasing, just think about, if you're seeking the approval of everybody in this room, okay? You want everybody to be happy with you and pleased with you and your performance, okay? Picture everybody with a hammer and chisel. Because now, if you're trying to please everybody and make everybody happy, it is a group project idol. You want everybody to chip on you. And you want to be this idol for everybody that makes everybody happy and everybody glad. Only God can make everybody happy and everybody glad. Only He can do that. So when you're a people pleaser, everybody around you has a hammer and chisel. Or do you entrust yourself to the Lord and say, whatever curveballs He throws me, they're going to craft me in the image of Him. And whatever pain I have in standing up for Him, in representing Him well, that's according to His good and glad design. How do you handle shame? How do you handle shame? What do you do with it? How do you get rid of shame? I shared again downstairs. I said, there's hardly a person that can go to a high school reunion and not regret something they did there. There's got to be something that you're humiliated about, that you hope everybody forgot, Probably the first thing someone's going to say to you when you get there, right? But what do you do with that? Do you seek to outdo the mistakes you've made by more accomplishments, by airbrushing the past, by blame shifting? How do you handle your shame? Do you give it to Christ and be made whole in Him? That's when you start looking and imaging forth Jesus. Otherwise, you just start looking like you and promoting yourself as a false idol. Where is your deepest hope? What do you daydream about? What do you most ponder? Is it some earthly entity or heavenly? Because if it's earthly, you're not possibly going to get let down. You are certainly going to get let down if it's earthly. And anything on earth will let you down. And your face in that moment will be more like Cain, downcast, upset, disgusted, despairing. But when your face is looking to the Lord, the psalmist says, your face is radiant. So where's your hope? When you look towards God, you are an image that actually looks like God, for God is light. Amen? So you'll be a radiant person when your hope is in Him, not in something of this earth. Describe to me the one who rules over you. No matter who you are this morning, somebody is ruling over you. You might be ruling over yourself, the person sitting next to you. You might look at as the one who's ruling over you. But ultimately, some voice above you is ruling over you. Describe who that person is. Describe what they're like. Would you describe them as harsh or gentle? Would you describe them as impossibly demanding, or one that assigns impossible tasks but gives you the strength amazingly and the sufficiency to complete the task? You see, in this text, the Bible describes God as someone that commands obedience out of you, but also the one that breaks your yoke of slavery. So at once in the same time, you are to work hard and to be free. It's both. You're to rest and you're to labor in a beautiful way, in a beautiful combination. So how do you go about life? Do you feel like you're getting whipped to go about life, or do you feel like you're being gently guided to go about life? Do you feel like you have impossible tasks put upon you with no hope and that you're just crushed under the mountain? Or do you see God give you impossible tasks, but also the little steps to get them done in an amazingly God-glorifying way? This demonstrates how well you represent God. And then lastly, which leads into our third point on rest. How weary do you feel? Or how energized do you feel? Does your weariness lead to despair? Or does your weariness / energy lead to thankfulness? If your weariness leads to despair, you're casting an image of yourself. But if God gives you the energy, and yeah, at certain times you get weary, but you're glad to be weary because God sent you in these ways to do these things, then you'll be thankful and you'll say, look, I remember my friend Tony talked to me, he was studying through the book of Mark, and in the book of Mark, Jesus and the disciples, they feed all these droves of people, and then they get in the boat to go to the other side of the lake so that they can have some time to rest, and they get caught in a storm on the lake, and they're in the lake all night, okay? So they just worked all day, okay? They wanted to send the people home. Jesus says, no, let's feed them. So they clocked overtime, okay, in their minds. Then it's time to go to sleep. So let's go to a quiet place and rest. But then they get caught in a storm, and they're up all night in the storm. I mean, man, in a storm, trying to row, trying to figure out how to get to shore. Just a nightmare of a situation. They're out there all night. They get to the other side of the lake, and guess who's waiting for them? More people that want to hear more stuff. And it's like, you got to be kidding me. And that's where Jesus says to the disciples, let's serve them. It's like, man, if I think about wilderness, like mutiny going on a wilderness trip or on a missions trip, mutiny would take place here. No, we're out. We're out. Send them away. We got to sleep. But Jesus ministers to them again, and he gives them the strength and the sufficiency to do it. So what is your life typified by? Is it weariness to despair, or is it weariness mixed with energy that leads to thankfulness? Thankfulness. Because if you're a thankful person, you image forth the strength of God in an exceptional way. And so once you honor and reverence his sanctuary right, you receive his name rightly. And then you start to look like his actual image inside his actual temple. And when this happens, you look like Eden, where it all started. Look at in this passage how many things have to do with what was once had in Genesis 1, 2, and 3. You've got an image of God, that's Genesis 1. You've got rest talked about with Sabbath, that's day 7 of creation. You've got sanctuary talked about here. God carved out a garden for Adam and Eve to dwell with him in. You've got blessing talked about here, enormous blessing, just like God blessed Adam and Eve. You've got alternatively life, which is the blessing section, and death in the disobedient section, which we'll get into next week, Lord willing. You've got walking together, where God walks with man. He's going to dwell with them and walk here. They're supposed to walk in his commandments. You've got rain. Genesis talks about God sending the rain. And then you've got rain promised here. You've got fruit-bearing trees. You've got secure land. Adam was meant to guard the land. You've got fruitful and multiply mentioned. In other words, basically, if you honor these 3 areas, you will end up being like an oasis to the world. An oasis of God. I remember at my grandpa George's funeral, there was an opportunity for people to stand up and share anything about George. And I'll never forget, one guy spoke up, and he said, anytime I came to George's house, he gave me something to drink, and he offered me something to eat. No matter what time of the day, what was going on, I came in, and he says, hey, what can I get you to drink? You want something to eat? Like, it was just the way it was. And I thought, what a great attribute for someone. Just, it's an offer to sit down and let me refresh you. And this can happen through conversation. This can happen with prayer. Man, God uses such unbelievable moments. If you have the guts, just this week, I was in a situation talking to someone outside of the church that is facing just tremendous sorrow, tremendous anxiety with a couple things that's fallen on them just recently. And in the midst of it, God just laid on my heart, pray for them, pray for them. So I said, hey, can I pray for you? I prayed for them. I got up, started putting on my jacket, just flowing tears, just weeping. Like, God wants us to be a people that refreshes whoever we're with. And this is what it's like when you honor God's name rightly, and then his name gets put on you. But I'm going to tell you what it's like if you don't do that. And I know this firsthand experience. Have you ever tried to save someone who's drowning? Do you know that sometimes lifeguards have to punch the person that they're seeking to save from drowning? Okay? Why would they have to do that? Because they're drowning them. And I know both sides of that. Trying to help someone and being helped. Because I took that dude's shoulder and I pushed him as low as I possibly could when I was a kid to just catch some air in a big pool in Indiana. This is what we're like when we don't honor God's name rightly. We become like a drowning victim. And anybody that comes around us, we just suffocate because we need air. And we look to them to give us air because where aren't we looking? To God and his place where he lives. So this is the difference. The idea is that when you honor God right and his image is put on you, you will be a person of rest. When you honor God wrongly, you will be not a person of rest. You will be the most tired person you know. Because if you're not looking to God, who are you looking to be God? I mean, the people around you and yourself. And I mean, have you ever been that person that goes to get someone's advice and that person thinks they gave you great advice and then you call the next person to get advice from them? Have you ever met people like that? And you realize, oh my goodness, I'm going to stop giving you advice because I know you called Jeff right after you called me. Right? I mean, come on. Like, was mine not good enough? What did he tell you? Amazingly, he told me the same thing. You know? Like, we're looking to people to be God, or we're looking to ourselves to be God, and what does that do to us? It wears us out. It makes us weary. So there is absolutely no rest. Now, I'm going to talk very briefly on a little bit of last week's message. Did any of you disagree with me last week on fear? Oh, you're so mean. Okay, so they weren't the only ones. Other people asked me too. So let me just say a little bit about that. Dan was one that said, you need to explain that a little more. And listen, I could be wrong about this. I don't think I am. I still hold by what I said. But you don't have to agree with me. It just means you'd be wrong. Okay? All right. So what did I mean? What did I mean by? I asked last week if there was a taproot of sin. Most people would think that that's what? Pride. That's the typical. That's what you'd think, and that could be the case. Okay. I think what it is misguided fear that leads to pride. But let me talk through it just a little bit. So we talked about last week, Daniel read some scripture, we sang a song. What did Christ free us from? What did Christ free us from? Well, what I shared last week is that Christ freed us from weariness, from bondage, from being slaves to what the Bible calls the god of this world, the prince of the power of the air, the ruler of this world. Those are all different things Satan's called, okay? And how does he keep his people in bondage? How does he keep them slaves? Well, both Hebrews and Romans say that he keeps them slaves through bondage to fear, okay? Bondage to fear. So that's the thing that I want to unpack here for a second. What do I mean by fear? Let me just say this. The moment Isabel, Christina's, other pregnant moms in here, the moment their babies are going to be born, they are going to be in a state of what? Need, fear. They want to breathe. They want to eat. They want to sleep. They want to survive. It's a self-preservation sort of just instinct, okay? That's what I talk about initially when I say fear, okay? I think I may have... Jesus talks about this. Matthew 10:28. Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. So I think from Jesus' words in Matthew 10, is everybody fearing something? Yes or no? 100%. Everybody's fearing something. The question is what do you fear? Okay? How do you handle your fear? That's the big question that I think answers. And how does this relate to rest? I'll get to that in a second. So I think the big question of like everybody living in an instinctual state of fear is, to whom will you entrust your well-being? You know, when Jesus says, love your neighbor as you love yourself, is loving yourself sinful? Does Jesus think it's sinful when he says that? No. He's saying, just like you take care of your appetite, just like you breathe when you need oxygen, just like you drink when you need rehydrated, do that for everybody else. Take care of them, like the way you take care of yourself. It's not wrong to take care of yourself, okay? That's just a natural state of need, of fear. And so that's what I'm talking about when I say fear. And hopefully this helps a little bit. But the big question is to whom will you entrust your well-being? I think Adam and Eve were born, and I think Adam and Eve cared about their well-being. The question is to whom would they entrust that well-being? Would they entrust it to themselves to handle their needs and desires and wants, or would they entrust it to God? So take a look at this illustration here. It's unfortunate. At the bottom, I have fear. That's the fear I'm talking about. It's not a bad fear. It's a need fear. It's I need to survive. A will to exist. I want to live, okay? That's not a bad fear. But that fear can go in one of two directions. I would say, I think Scripture says, that fear can go to the fear of God, or it can go to the fear of pride. And that's why when people say the mother of all sin is pride, I agree with that. But I would say it's misguided fear turns into pride. That when I have needs, I go in the direction of handling it myself. I think this is how Satan tempted Jesus in the wilderness. What does he say to Jesus? Jesus has gone 40 days, 40 nights with no bread. It's the verge of medical death. Okay? He says, turn these stones to bread. You know? I think he's working off Jesus' apparent need. I'm going to die. And Jesus doesn't fall prey to that. Because how does man really live? Do you really live off of bread? I mean, we're kind of like, yeah, we do. What does God say to the people in the wilderness generation? I fed you in the wilderness so that you know that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of the Lord. And so God can make you live with or without bread. He can do whatever he wants to do. You ultimately live by God. So the question is whatever needs you have, is that subjected to the fear of God or the fear to pride? And here's what's fascinating, and here's just the application that I want you to have from this. I really hope you catch this. That if you fear God, guess what you fear then? If you're fearing God rightly, what else do you fear? Everybody say it. Nothing. You fear nothing. If you fear God rightly, you don't have to fear anything. And that's why you see believers march out to meet lions and gladiators. And their marching is so fearless that the people observing their imminent death are led to Jesus by saying, how is that possible to live like that? Okay? Now, if you don't fear God, what do you have to fear? Absolutely everything. Why? Because you're playing who? God. So you have to mitigate every problem in every place with every person and everything. What does that make you? Rested or tired? And Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest for your souls. That's the idea. And so the ultimate thing is, if you fear God rightly, look at how Jeremiah talks. Thus says the Lord, let not the wise man boast in his wisdom. Let not the mighty man boast in his might. Let not the rich man boast in his riches. But let him who boasts boast in this, that he understands and knows me. I am the Lord who practices steadfast love, justice, righteousness in the earth. For in these things I delight, declares the Lord. So the sole focus of the man who fears the Lord is God. And that is the place he looks all the time in everything. That's the idea. And friends, was there ever a person who did this? Just one. Just one. And that is the person of Jesus Christ. Was the Father at the center of every one of Jesus' stories? 100%, all the time. Jesus never took the glory away from the Father. Pastor Alex is making me a Lord of the Rings total nerd. And one of his favorite scenes is there's two like apparent leaders of the humans in the story. Boromir, right? Boromir is one, and he's one that wants to take the ring from Frodo to killing him if need be. He's gonna get this ring. And so wherever Frodo goes, he's meeting people whose eyes start going crazy and they're about to murder him to get the ring. That's what he's used to. He's used to people wanting that glory, wanting that power. And then there's Aragorn, who's another leader of the humans. And there comes a point where Aragorn is walking towards him, and his eyes are starting to look a little bit eerie, and Frodo's backing up because this is another moment. He just came from Boromir, now he's encountering Aragorn, and Aragorn comes to him and takes his hand and closes it over the ring. He says, I don't want the ring. And there's a sense in which Jesus continually does that in regard to the Father. I don't speak on my own initiative. I'm not trying to get the glory here. I'm trying to give the Father glory. I don't act. I see what the Father does, and then I do that. So Jesus consistently keeps the attention on the Father. What about defending himself when criticized? Well, of all people, the only person never worthy of any criticism was Jesus. And Peter tells us that Jesus remained silent when criticized and continually entrusted himself to the Father. Let me ask, did Jesus, when he thought of others, did he think about them? 100%. He actually came to this earth solely for the purpose to serve and not to be served. One of the best ways you can tell, am I a person that uses others as tools for me, or I'm really concerned about them, is to ask yourself the question, how frequently are you caught up in praying for the people around you with their struggles and their hurdles? That's a great way to tell if you're really thinking about others for their own sake. And Jesus consistently prays for his people. He's doing it right now for all of us, interceding on our behalf, Paul tells us. What about caring for others' approval? Jesus will have his own enemies come up to him and they say, we know you don't care about anything what other people say about you, but you only speak truth. He cared only about the Father's approval. What about shame? Did Jesus have any shame? He had one shame, and it was ours, right? He took our shame. He bore our nakedness on the cross. The greatest shame he bore gladly for our sake. What about Jesus' deepest hope? What does the author of Hebrews say? For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, the worst imaginable fate. He so enjoyed the Father and his presence. What about, how would you describe your ruler? How did Jesus describe his Father? He loved his Father. He only spoke good about his Father. Even when things were disorienting, where people didn't believe in him. He praised the Father for hiding the truth about him from the wise and learned and giving it to the children. What about Jesus' work? Well, Jesus did more than humanly possible, but he did it with great joy and willingness. And then did Jesus ever find time to sleep? Yeah, Jesus was able to rest in a boat in the middle of a storm. So Jesus modeled both workmanship and rest in an unbelievably beautiful way. And so when it comes to Leviticus 26, and you say, okay, how do we handle the sanctuary? How do we handle being an image of God? How do we handle rest? Look no further than to who? Jesus Christ, and he is all that for you. So if you're in him, you're good. You're safe. You're confident. You're whole. You can die this afternoon, and you're okay. You're okay. The worst imaginable, the 5 things you don't want to happen could happen all this afternoon, and your peace will be unshakable because it's not in those 5 things. It's in Jesus Christ. And Paul calls him a living hope. He doesn't die. He doesn't change. Same yesterday, today, and forever. Is he your hope this morning? Musicians, would you please come?